Hi everyone, welcome to our second series on the Saints and Us. I'm Paul.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Nikki.
For those of you who are joining us for the first time on this series, The Saints and Us is a series of videos where we reflect on the lives of the saints. We hope that learning about the lives of the saints can inspire and motivate us to live our faith lives with deeper conviction.
That's right, Paul. Today we'll be talking about the topic of obedience. Nikki, do you know any saints who live out obedience very well?
Actually, I do, Josh. One saint that comes to mind is St. Oscar Romero.
Oh, his name sounds really familiar.
Yes, St. Oscar Romero was the Archbishop of San Salvador during the rise of the El Salvadoran Civil War. He was a bold social activist speaking up against social injustice and violence. At the time, these issues were sensitive to the people of El Salvador, and different sides fought violently with each other over these disagreements.
Wow, Saint Romero sounds like a really brave man.
Yes, he really was. But did you know he actually wasn't naturally like this?
Oh.
His close friends all knew him as someone who was introverted and reserved. And from his letters, we know that he constantly experienced fear and anxiety over his social activism. All of this was part of his radical obedience to the will of God.
Nikki, that's really so inspiring. You know, I always find it hard to be obedient when God asks me to do something that's uncomfortable. But seeing the life of Saint Romero assures me that it's possible to live and obey God so radically.
St. Romero's obedience to God ultimately led to his martyrdom, and he was assassinated while celebrating Mass. By his life and death, he bore witness that the truth and the gospel needs to be proclaimed, even despite heavy persecution.
Well, thanks for that amazing story, Nikki. So who's our next saint, Josh?
Our next saint is Saint Elizabeth of the Trinity. She was a Carmelite nun, mystic, and writer. Have you guys heard of her before?
Yes, I think I have, Josh. Her vocation story sounds really interesting, right?
Oh, tell me more.
Her own radical obedience to God was exercised in her discernment of her vocation. She received her first invitation to religious life very early. At 14, she accepted Jesus' invitation to be her spouse and made a vow of virginity. Shortly after, she received a clear call to the Carmelite life.
Oh, so her obedience was practiced in following this call, right?
That's right, Nikki. But following the call brought her on a really surprising journey. Even though she heard the call to religious life early, her mother was strongly against it. She stopped her from even thinking about religious life, and even prevented her from going for Mass or visiting the nuns at her parish.
That's right, Paul. The resistance from her mother was a source of great suffering for Saint Elizabeth. But she eventually discerned that God was calling her to wait and be obedient to her mother's wishes in that season.
Yes, Josh. Later, after she entered the convent at the age of 21, it became clear to Saint Elizabeth that those painful years of waiting were a time of purification for her. It allowed her to realize how close and intimate Jesus was to her in everyday moments and encounters.
Wow, that's really cool, Paul.
Indeed, we are so blessed to have the witnesses of these saints and their radical obedience. Truly, their amazing trust in the Lord are great examples of faith.
Yes, in both these saints, we see how God invites us to die to ourselves, to set aside our own desires, and to follow His invitations, even if we don't necessarily understand why He's inviting us in those ways.
We saw how this radical obedience to God bore fruit in the lives of these saints and those around them. May the examples of these saints teach us to trust in God's goodness. May we remember that His will leads us to goodness and wholeness, and brings life to us and those around us.
This week, we wish to challenge all of you to reflect on areas where you struggle to exercise obedience. Do you struggle with authority figures in your lives? Do you resist God's invitations to you? Wherever you struggle, pray for the grace of trust and begin exercising radical obedience in these areas. Till next time, I'm Paul.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Nikki.
And this has been The Saints and Us.
See you next time. Bye.